stop spending your dimes immediately. The government just announced new regulations that could make these 5-dime errors completely illegal to own by the end of 2026. And if you have any of these in your pocket change right now, you could be sitting on $50,000 or more. I'm going to show you exactly what to look for, but first pause this video, grab every dime you can find and check them against what I'm about to show you. Because once these regulations go into effect, these coins will disappear from circulation forever. Just last month, a collector in Ohio found one of these error dimes in his car's cup holder. He sold it at auction for $47,000. Another collector in Texas found 3 of these errors in a single roll from the bank that's over $150,000 from a $10 roll of dimes. But here's what's really crazy: the government is specifically targeting these error dimes because they contain metal compositions that violate new federal regulations. That means every single one of these errors you find today could be worth exponentially more once they're banned. I've been tracking dime error sales for the past 6 months, and the prices are absolutely exploding. What sold for $5,000 in September is now selling for $20,000. What sold for $10,000 is now hitting $50,000 at auction. And according to my sources at the U.S. Mint, the official announcement about these dime regulations is coming within the next 60 days. Once that happens, every collector in America is going to be hunting for these exact same errors. Take a coin that most people throw back in the jar without a second thought. A 1947 Lincoln Wheat Penny. 15 cents in a dealer's junk bin. That's what they'll tell you. But they're wrong. Because in January 2025, a single 1947 wheat penny sold at Heritage Auctions for $26,400. 1 penny. $26,000. And with the penny ban looming, that number is about to look like a discount. Here's why this coin is so dangerous to ignore. The San Francisco Mint struck only 99 million pennies in 1947. That sounds like a lot until you realize Philadelphia made 190 million and Denver made 194 million. San Francisco made roughly half of what the other 2 mints produced. But here's where it gets wild. Of those 99 million coins, only about 13,000 are estimated to survive in collectible condition today. That's a survival rate of 1 out of every 7,600 coins. The rest were melted, lost, damaged, or destroyed over nearly 80 years of circulation. And once the penny ban takes effect, there won't be any more entering circulation. Ever. What survives is all there will ever be. Now flip this coin over and look at the reverse. You see those 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent? This is why collectors call them wheat pennies. But what you really need to focus on are the details between those stalks. Because the 1947 has a documented double die obverse error that most people walk right past. The variety is cataloged as FS 101, and it shows clear doubling on the letters of In God We Trust and on the date. The doubling is subtle on worn coins, but on a well-preserved example, it jumps right out at you. A double die 1947 in MS64 grade has sold for $748. In MS67, that price climbs past $3,000. And the thing is, most people who own this coin have never flipped it under a magnifying glass to check. But the double die isn't even the only error to hunt for. The 1947 also comes with a repunched mint mark variety, cataloged as FS 504. What happened is the San Francisco mint worker who punched the S mint mark into the working die didn't get it right the first time. So they punched it again. And now if you look closely below the date, you'll see a second ghost image of the S slightly offset from the primary one. It's literally an S over S. In MS67, that repunched mint mark error has sold for $1,350 for a coin that most people think is worth 15 cents. And there's one more thing that makes the 1947 special that almost nobody talks about. 1947 was the first year the United States Mint restored the original bronze composition after World War II. From 1944 through 1946, pennies were struck from recycled ammunition shell casings. They removed tin from the alloy, making those coins technically brass, not bronze. But in 1947, the Mint brought tin back into the formula, returning to the original 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc recipe that had been used since 1909. That makes the 1947S the first San Francisco penny in 5 years struck in true bronze. Collectors who understand metallurgy pay a premium for that distinction, especially when the coin still shows its original red copper luster. So when you're going through your wheat pennies and you find a 1947 with that little s below the date, do not toss it in the 15-cent pile. Check for doubling on In God We Trust. Check for a repunched mint mark. Check the color. Because the difference between a coin worth 15 cents and a coin worth $26,000 is 5 minutes with a magnifying glass. And once the penny ban makes these coins impossible to find in pocket change, that window closes forever. Take a look at this dime. Go ahead. Really look at it. It's dark. It's scratched up. It's been sitting in someone's pocket for over 70 years. Most people would walk right past this coin without thinking twice. It's a 1953 Roosevelt dime from the Denver Mint, and honestly, it looks like something you'd find stuck between your couch cushions. But here's what nobody tells you. This exact coin, in the right condition and with one specific detail, has sold for over $28,000 at auction. And the person who sold it had no idea what they had until a coin dealer nearly fell out of his chair looking at it. Let me explain exactly what makes this dime so special, and more importantly, how you can check yours in about 10 seconds. First, let's talk about what you're holding. Every Roosevelt dime made before 1965 is struck in 90% silver. That alone gives it a melt value of about $1.50 right now. But that's not why collectors are fighting over this coin. The 1953 D. Roosevelt dime had a massive production run. The Denver Mint churned out over 136 million of these. So you'd think they'd be worthless, right? Just another common dime lost in the shuffle. But that's exactly what makes this so exciting, because hidden inside those 136 million coins are a handful of errors that the Mint never caught. And those errors are what turn a 10-cent coin into a 5-figure payday. Here's the first thing you need to check. Flip your dime over to the back side. You're looking at a torch in the center, with an olive branch on the left and an oak branch on the right. Now look closely at the torch. Right near the middle, you'll see horizontal lines that run across the bands of the torch. On most dimes, these lines are mushed together. They're flat, blurry, and you can barely tell them apart. That's because the dies that struck these coins wore down fast, and by the time they'd stamped a few 100,000 dimes, those tiny details were basically gone. But every once in a while, a coin got struck with a fresh die. And when that happened, those horizontal lines came through perfectly crisp, perfectly separated, with a clear gap between each band. Collectors call this a full band strike, and it is the single most important thing that separates a $2 dime from a $28,000 dime. I want you to grab a magnifying glass right now. You don't need anything fancy, even your phone's camera zoomed in will work. Look at those horizontal bands on the torch and ask yourself one question. Can I see a clear, unbroken separation between the bands? If the answer is yes, do not spend that dime. Do not put it back in your change jar. You could be holding something worth thousands of dollars. Now, here's why this gets even crazier. The 1953 D is one of the hardest dates to find with full bands in the entire Roosevelt dime series. Think about that for a second. They made 136 million of them. But because of the way the Denver Mint operated their presses that year, the dies wore down faster than usual. Some experts estimate that fewer than 1 in every 50,000 1953 D dimes has true full bands. That means out of 136 million coins, there might only be a few thousand in existence. and most of those have already been found and locked away in private collections. But here's the part that should make your heart beat a little faster. Coin rolls from the 1950s are still showing up at banks. Estate sales happen every single week. Old piggy banks get cracked open. Jars of change get dumped on kitchen tables. And every single time that happens, there's a chance that one of those dimes is a 1953 D with full bands that nobody has ever looked at twice. Let me tell you about a collector named David from Pennsylvania. David had been collecting coins casually for about 3 years. Nothing serious, just pulling interesting-looking coins out of his change and dropping them in a shoebox. One Sunday afternoon, he decided to go through that shoebox with a cheap magnifying glass he bought at a dollar store. He wasn't expecting much. He'd already gone through most of the quarters and pennies and found nothing special. But when he got to his dimes, he noticed one that was darker than the rest. More toned, more beat up. It was a 1953 D. He almost tossed it back in the box, but something told him to flip it over. He looked at the torch, and even through all that grime and toning, he could see it. The bands were fully separated. Every single one. Clean, crisp lines with visible gaps between them. David sent that dime to a professional grading service, and when it came back, it was authenticated as a 1953 D full-band Roosevelt dime. He listed it online, and within 48 hours, it sold for $11,400. From a shoebox. From a dime he almost threw away. And David's coin wasn't even in great shape. It was circulated, toned, and had scratches on it. Imagine what a cleaner example would bring. In fact, the record sale for a 1953 D full-band dime in mint state condition is just over $28,000, and prices have been climbing steadily over the past 2 years. The reason is simple. Supply is shrinking and demand is growing. More and more collectors are realizing just how rare full-band examples are for this date, and every time one sells at auction, the price goes up. Now here's the detail that ties this back to what I told you at the beginning of this video. The upcoming government regulations on circulating coinage are going to make it harder to pull silver dimes out of circulation. Once these new rules go into effect, banks will be required to sort and return pre-1965 silver coins to the Federal Reserve instead of recirculating them. That means the window to find a 1953 D full-band dime in the wild is closing fast. Every week that passes, there are fewer of these coins floating around in everyday change. And once they're gone for good. So let me break this down for you one more time. Look at the reverse of your dime. Check the horizontal bands on the torch. If they are fully separated with clear gaps between each line, you need to get that coin graded immediately. Don't clean it. Don't polish it. Don't even rub it with your fingers. The oils from your skin can actually reduce the grade and cost you thousands of dollars. Put it in a plastic flip or a small Ziploc bag and take it to a professional. Because what looks like a dirty old dime from 1953 could be your ticket to a payday you never saw coming. And if you think that's impressive, wait until you see the next dime on this list. Because the error on this one is so subtle, most coin dealers miss it completely. Now this $85,000. That's what one single 1925 penny sold for at Heritage Auctions. Not a gold coin. Not a silver dollar. A copper penny from the roaring 20s that most people would toss in a junk jar without a second look. And with the penny ban looming, coins like this are about to become relics of a dead currency. The kind of relics that collectors will fight over. The 1925 wheat penny was struck at 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and the total production was just under 189 million coins. That sounds like a lot until you realize that the survival rate in collectible condition is absolutely brutal. Out of nearly 140 million Philadelphia pennies, only about 5,500 high-grade examples still exist. That's a survival rate of 0.004%. Denver? Only 750 survivors from 22.6 million struck. And San Francisco is the real shocker. Out of 26.4 million coins, only about 450 have survived in high grade. That's a survival rate of 0.0017%. Almost every single one of them was used up, worn down, and destroyed by a century of circulation. Now here's what makes the 1925 D penny a monster. A single 1925 D-graded MS66 red, meaning it still has its original copper color, sold for $85,500. Let that sink in. A penny. $85,500. And the reason is simple. Denver pennies from this era have notoriously weak strikes. Finding one with sharp detail on Lincoln's hair, clean wheat lines on the reverse, and full original red luster is like finding a unicorn in your pocket change. But the errors are where this coin gets truly dangerous for your wallet. The 1925 S double die obverse, cataloged as FS101, is one of the most thrilling finds in the entire Lincoln cent series. During the die-making process, the hub impressed the design onto the working die twice at slightly different angles. The result is a ghostly doubling effect you can see on Lincoln's eye. It looks like he has an extra eyelid. You'll also catch it on the letters of Liberty and In God We Trust under magnification. Confirmed examples in circulated condition sell for $50 to $200, and an MS65 brown specimen sold for over $1,100 at auction. But here's the trick most people miss. True double dies show three-dimensional, shelf-like doubling. If the doubling looks flat and mushy, that's worthless machine doubling. You need that sharp raised separation between the impressions. Then there's the 1925 S/S repunched mint mark, cataloged as FS501 and listed in Konicka's top 100 RPMs. Back in the 1920s, mint workers had to punch the S mint mark into each die by hand using a small steel rod. Sometimes the first punch missed or wasn't deep enough, so they'd punch again. That second strike created a visible shadow, two S mint marks layered on top of each other. An MS64 red example sold for $1,920 at auction. Even circulated examples with clear repunching trade for $100 to $500. Look directly below the date. If you see what looks like extra curves or serifs attached to the S, you might be holding a small fortune. And don't overlook off-center strikes. When the blank planche wasn't properly centered between the dies, you get a coin with part of the design missing and a crescent-shaped blank area. A 1925 penny struck 50% off-center, but still showing the full date can sell for $200 to $500. Even minor off-center errors in the 5 to 10% range are worth $5 to $15, which is still 500 to 1,500 times face value on a 1-cent coin. The 1925 wheat penny is 100 years old this year. It survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and a century of being ignored in jars and drawers. And now, with the penny facing elimination, every single one of these becomes a permanent artifact, a piece of American history that will never be minted again. Check your wheat pennies. Check the mint mark. Check for doubling. Because a coin worth a fraction of a cent at face value could be worth your entire car payment. Next dime is the one that makes coin dealers lose sleep at night. And I'm not exaggerating. Take a look at it. It's dark. It's grimy. It's got scratches all over it, and it honestly looks like something you'd find on the floor of a laundromat. It's a 1962 Roosevelt dime from the Denver Mint. And if you looked at it for 5 seconds, you'd probably toss it right back into your change pile without thinking twice. But I need you to listen to me very carefully right now. Because this single date, this 1 year from the Denver Mint, is responsible for some of the most shocking auction results in the entire Roosevelt dime series. And what makes it so dangerous is that almost nobody knows what to look for. Let me give you the number first so you understand what we're dealing with. In 2023, a 1962 D Roosevelt dime sold at a major auction house for over $30,000. $30,000 for a coin with a face value of 10 cents. And the person who consigned that coin to the auction house found it in a coffee can that had been sitting in their grandmother's basement for over 40 years. A coffee can. That's where $30,000 was hiding. Now here's why the 1962 D is such a monster. The Denver Mint produced over 334 million of these dimes in 1962. That's an absolutely enormous number, more than most years in the entire Roosevelt series. And because of that massive production run, most people assume these coins are worthless. They think high mintage means low value. But that assumption is exactly what creates the opportunity. Because the Denver Mint was running their presses so hard and so fast that year that the dies were deteriorating at an alarming rate. And when dies deteriorate, two things happen. The first thing is that the fine details on the coin start to disappear. The torch bands get mushy, the leaves lose their definition, and the overall strike quality drops. But the second thing is far more interesting. When a die starts to crack and break down under pressure, it can create what collectors call die varieties. Tiny, subtle differences that make one coin look slightly different from another coin struck just minutes later on the same press. And the 1962 D has some of the most sought-after die varieties in the entire series. But before we get into the varieties, let's start with the most valuable thing you can look for on this coin. And it's the exact same test I showed you on the last dime, but with a critical difference. Flip your 1962 D over to the reverse side. Look at the torch. Check those horizontal bands. Now here's what makes the 1962 D so special. Because of the speed and pressure the Denver Mint was using that year, finding a 1962 D with fully separated bands is astronomically rare. Some grading experts estimate that fewer than 1 in every 100,000 1962 D dimes has true full band separation. Think about that for a moment. They made 334 million of these coins, and statistically there might be only 3,000 or so with perfect full bands in existence. And a huge number of those have already been found, graded, and locked away in collectors' vaults where they will never see the light of day again. That's why prices are going through the roof. When supply is that limited and demand keeps growing, every single example that surfaces becomes a bidding war. The $30,000 sale I mentioned was for a coin-graded Mint State 67 with full bands. But even circulated examples with full bands are commanding serious money. A 1962 D that's been worn down, spent, passed through hundreds of hands, and still somehow retained its full band detail sold for over $4,000 last year. $4,000 for a coin that looked like it had been through a washing machine. Now let me show you the second thing you need to check, and this is where it gets really exciting. Look at the reverse of your coin again, but this time, don't look at the torch. Look at the mint mark. On a 1962 D, the small letter D sits just to the left of the base of the torch. On most examples, that D is clean, clear, and struck in one solid impression. But on a small number of 1962 D dimes, something went wrong during the die preparation process. The mint mark was punched into the die by hand in those days, and sometimes the worker doing the punching didn't get it right on the first try. When that happened, they'd punch the mint mark again, slightly offset from the first impression. This created what's called a repunched mint mark, and on certain 1962 D dimes, you can actually see a ghost of the original D sitting just slightly to the north or south of the final position. Grab your magnifying glass and look at that D very carefully. Does it look like there's a shadow behind it? Does one edge of the letter seem thicker than the other? Can you see the faintest outline of a second D peeking out from underneath? If you can see any of those things, you might have a repunched mint mark variety. And depending on which specific variety it is, that coin could be worth anywhere from $500 to over $8,000. There are at least 4 documented repunched mint mark varieties for the 1962 D, and coin variety specialists have been hunting for new ones for decades. But here's the part that should really get your attention. There is one specific 1962 D variety that collectors have nicknamed the Super D. On this variety, the mint mark was punched so dramatically off-center the first time that the repunch is visible to the naked eye. You don't even need a magnifying glass. You can literally hold the coin at arm's length and see that something is wrong with the D. It looks too thick, almost like it was bolded. And if you have one of those, you are holding one of the most sought-after Roosevelt dime varieties of the entire series. The last confirmed Super D 1962 dime sold at auction for just under $12,000, and it wasn't even in great condition. Now let me connect this back to what's happening right now. Remember what I said at the beginning of this video about the government pulling silver coins out of circulation. Every 1962 D Roosevelt dime is made of 90% silver. Every single one. And once the new federal regulations take effect, banks will be required to sort these coins out instead of putting them back into circulation. That means the chance of finding a 1962 D in your pocket change at a bank or in a roll of dimes you order from your local branch is shrinking by the day. I talked to a coin roll hunter last week who told me he used to find 3 or 4 silver Roosevelt dimes in every box of dimes he ordered from the bank. Now he's lucky to find one. The silver is being pulled out faster than ever, and once these regulations are official, it's going to accelerate to the point where finding a silver dime in circulation becomes virtually impossible. So here's exactly what you need to do. Every dime that crosses your hands from now on, check the date first. If it says 1962 with a D mint mark on the reverse, pull it immediately. Then check the torch bands for full separation. Then check the mint mark for any sign of repunching. Even if it doesn't have full bands or a repunched mint mark, a 1962 D Roosevelt dime in silver is still worth more than face value just for the metal content. But if you find one with full bands or that Super D variety, you could be looking at a life-changing amount of money from a coin that most people wouldn't bother to pick up off the sidewalk. And what I'm about to show you next might be the most underrated dime in American history. Collectors have been sleeping on this one for years, and the prices are just now starting to explode. Now, or more. 1957. Eisenhower is in the White House, gas costs 24 cents a gallon, and deep inside the Denver Mint, a worker just made a mistake that would be worth more than a brand new car 68 years later. He's holding a steel punch with a tiny letter D on the end, and he's about to stamp it into a working die. But his hand slips. The D lands slightly off, so he lines it up again and strikes it a second time. Still not perfect, he hits it a third time. 3 punches, 3 slightly different positions, and now that die has a D that looks like it's vibrating, like it's shaking, like it's screaming at you from the surface of the coin. That die went into production, and it struck thousands of pennies before anyone noticed. And today, one of those pennies sitting in your jar, in your junk drawer, in a roll you picked up from the bank, could put $4,000 in your pocket overnight. This is the 1957 D over D over D repunched mint mark, and it is one of the most dramatic RPM errors in the entire Lincoln cent series. Most repunched mint marks are subtle. You need a loop. You need perfect lighting. You need patience. Not this one. This one hits you in the face. The tripling on the D is so strong, so visible, that even a beginner with a $5 magnifying glass can spot it. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Dangerous for the people who don't know what they're looking at, because they're throwing money in the trash every single day. Let me explain exactly what a repunched mint mark is and why the mint can never make this mistake again. Before 1990, mint marks were not part of the master die. They were added by hand. A worker at the branch mint would take a steel punch and physically hammer the mint mark letter into each individual working die. Think about that. A human being, standing at a workbench, trying to perfectly position a tiny letter on a hardened steel surface and hit it with exactly the right force in exactly the right spot. Every single time. Thousands of dies a year. It's a miracle there aren't more errors. When the punch landed in a slightly different spot on the second or third strike, you got a repunched mint mark. The old position and the new position both show on the die, and every coin struck from that die carries the evidence. In 1990, the mint changed everything. They started engraving the mint mark directly into the master die using machines. No more hand punching. No more human error. No more repunched mint marks. Ever. That means every single RPM in existence was made before 1990, and they will never, ever make another one. The supply is locked. It's done. It's finished. And when the penny gets eliminated, these coins become historical artifacts from a process that no longer exists, struck on a denomination that no longer exists. That's 2 layers of extinction on one coin. Now here's where the money is. A 1957 D penny in average circulated condition is worth 1 cent. Maybe 2 cents for the copper. Nobody cares. But a 1957 D with the D over D over D repunched mint mark in choice uncirculated condition is sold for over $4,000. That is a 400,000% increase in value from a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. And here's the thing, circulated examples still carry serious value. Even in fine or very fine condition, confirmed RPM varieties of this coin sell for $200 to $500 depending on the strength of the repunching. You don't need a mint state gem to cash in on this one. So how do you find it? Grab every 1957 D penny you can get your hands on. Check the D mint mark below the date on the obverse. You're looking for doubling, tripling, or any shadow of a second D peeking out from behind the primary one. On the strongest examples, you'll see 3 distinct impressions stacked on top of each other, slightly offset. It almost looks like the letter is moving. If you see anything unusual, compare it to the known RPM varieties listed in the Cherry Picker's Guide. The 1957 D has multiple recognized RPM varieties, but the D over D over D triple punch is the king. This coin is a perfect example of why you need to check every single penny that crosses your path. Not just the old ones, not just the ones that look special, every single one. Because the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth $4,000 is invisible to the naked eye. You need magnification, you need knowledge, and you need to actually look. Most people never look. Most people will never know what they had. But you're not most people. You're watching this video and now you know exactly what to search for. 50. Now I need you to forget everything you think you know about modern dimes for the next few minutes. Because this coin right here is the one that trips up even experienced collectors. It's a 1967 Roosevelt dime. No mint mark. Heavy wear. Dark, ugly toning that makes it look like it's been sitting at the bottom of a swimming pool for 50 years. If you dumped a handful of change on a table, this is the coin your eyes would skip over completely. And that's exactly why people are making thousands of dollars finding these. Because nobody is looking. Let me hit you with a number that's going to sound absolutely ridiculous. A 1967 Roosevelt dime sold in early 2024 for over $10,000. $10,000 for a coin that most people alive today have probably held in their hand at some point and spent without a second thought. And here's the part that really gets me. The coin that sold for $10,000 wasn't some pristine museum piece locked behind glass. It was a coin that had been circulated, touched, carried, and spent just like the one you might have sitting in front of you right now. So what makes the 1967 so special? To understand that, you need to know what was happening at the United States Mint in 1967. And this is where the story gets really interesting. In 1965, the government made one of the biggest changes in American coinage history. They removed silver from dimes and quarters. Before 1965, every single Roosevelt dime was made of 90% silver. After 1964, they switched to a copper-nickel-clad composition. That means a dime made in 1967 is supposed to be a clad coin. Copper on the inside, nickel on the outside. No silver. 0%. That's the official story. But the official story isn't always the complete story. During the transition from silver to clad coinage, the United States Mint was running at full capacity. They were producing coins at a pace they had never attempted before. And during that chaos, something happened that the Mint has never fully acknowledged. A small number of 1967 dimes were accidentally struck on leftover silver planches from 1964. These are called transitional errors, and they are some of the rarest and most valuable coins in all of American numismatics. Now think about what that means for a second. You have a coin that looks exactly like every other 1967 dime in existence. Same size, same design, same weight almost. But instead of being made from clad copper nickel, it's made from 90% silver. And the only way to tell the difference is to know what to look for. Here's your first test, and you can do this right now without any special equipment. Pick up your 1967 dime and look at the edge. Not the front, not the back, the edge. On a normal clad 1967 dime, you'll see a thin copper stripe running through the middle of the edge. It's like a sandwich. Silver-colored metal on the outside, copper-colored metal in the middle. That copper stripe is the giveaway that it's a clad coin. But if your 1967 dime has a solid silver-colored edge with no copper stripe whatsoever, you need to stop what you're doing immediately. Because you might be holding a 1967 silver transitional error, and those coins start at $5,000 and go up from there. Way up. Here's your second test. Drop the coin on a hard surface. I know that sounds strange, but trust me on this. A clad dime makes a dull, flat sound when it hits a table. It sounds dead. But a silver dime rings. It has this beautiful, high-pitched tone that sustains for a second or two. It almost sounds like a tiny bell. If your 1967 dime rings instead of clunks, that's another strong indicator that you're dealing with silver. And here's your third test, and this one requires a simple kitchen scale. A normal clad 1967 dime weighs 2.27 grams. A silver dime weighs 2.50 grams. That's a difference of about 1/4 of a gram. It's small, but it's measurable. And if your 1967 dime comes in at 2.50 grams or very close to it, combined with the solid silver edge in the ring test, you are almost certainly looking at a transitional error worth thousands of dollars. Now let me tell you why these coins are so incredibly rare. The Mint was supposed to have completely exhausted its supply of silver planchets by 1965. All of the leftover 90% silver blanks were supposed to have been melted down and recycled into the new clad composition. But in a facility producing hundreds of millions of coins, things fall through the cracks. Literally. Silver planches got stuck in machines, wedged into corners of hoppers, and mixed into bins of clad blanks. And when those stray silver planches made their way into the stamping presses, they got struck with 1967 dies just like every other clad blank. The coins came out looking virtually identical, and they were shipped out to banks mixed in with millions of normal clad dimes. The estimates on how many 1967 silver transitional error dimes exist vary wildly. Some experts say fewer than 50. Others believe there could be a couple hundred scattered across the country, still sitting in change jars and coin collections where nobody has ever checked the edge. And that's what makes this so thrilling. These coins are out there. They have to be. The math doesn't lie. Billions of coins were produced during the transition years, and the quality control at the Mint was nowhere near good enough to catch every single silver planche that slipped through. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. Even if your 1967 dime is not a silver transitional error, it can still be worth serious money. The 1967 is one of 3 years where the Mint intentionally removed mint marks from all coins. 1965, 1966, and 1967 dimes have no mint mark regardless of which facility produced them. The government did this to discourage coin hoarding during the silver transition. But because there's no mint mark, collectors have a much harder time identifying which mint facility struck any given coin, and that mystery creates its own kind of value. There are documented die varieties for the 1967 dime that are extremely scarce. Double die obverse varieties where the date or the word Liberty shows subtle doubling. Repunched date varieties where the numbers appear to have been stamped slightly off position. And clash die varieties where the design from the obverse die transferred a ghost image onto the reverse die, leaving faint traces of Roosevelt's portrait visible on the torch side of the coin. Each of these varieties can be worth anywhere from $300 to several $1,000s depending on the severity and the condition. And remember what I keep telling you about the new regulations. The 1967 dime is a clad coin, so it won't be pulled from circulation for its silver content. But here's the catch. Collectors who are stacking silver Roosevelt dimes are also buying up key date clad dimes as part of complete sets. And the 1967, with its no mint mark status and its transitional error potential, is one of the most actively sought-after dates in the clad series. Prices have jumped over 30% in just the last 18 months, and with the ban driving more attention to Roosevelt dimes across the board, that trend is only accelerating. So here's what I need you to do. Check the edge. Do the ring test. Weigh it if you can. And even if it turns out to be a normal clad dime, check for doubling on the date and on the word Liberty with your magnifying glass, because this is the coin that rewards people who look closely. And one careful look could be the difference between 10 cents and $10,000. Now, the next dime on this list is one that even I was shocked to learn about. And when I tell you what happened at the mint the year this coin was made, you're going to understand why collectors are calling it a ticking time bomb. All $2,900. That's what one 1927 D Lincoln penny sold for at auction. A single coin made almost 100 years ago at the Denver Mint, sitting in somebody's collection, worth more than most people's annual salary. And the terrifying part is this: millions of these coins were made, 27 million to be exact, and the overwhelming majority of them were spent, lost, melted, or thrown into junk drawers and forgotten. But the ones that survived, the ones that still have that blazing original copper color, those are the coins that are rewriting the record books right now. Let's talk about why 1927 was a trap year at the Denver Mint. Before 1927, Denver had a serious problem. Their dies were cracking. Their strikes were sloppy. Coins were coming off the presses with weak details, mushy lettering, and flat features. It was a mess. But 1927, that was the year Denver finally got it right. The strike quality jumped. The detail sharpened up. And that created something collectors are absolutely obsessed with: a perfect storm of lower mintage and higher quality. Only 27 million 1927 D pennies were made compared to 144 million from Philadelphia. That's roughly 5 times fewer coins. And of those 27 million, the number that survived in pristine, uncirculated, full red condition, you could probably fit them all in a single shoebox. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Grab any 1927 D penny and flip it over. Look at that little D mint mark sitting right below the date. Does it look a little off? Does it look like there's a ghost of a second D right next to it? If so, you might be looking at the FS 501 repunched mint mark, one of the most sought-after Lincoln cent varieties of the entire 1920s. Here's what happened. Back in the 1920s, mint workers had to punch those tiny mint mark letters onto the dies by hand. A steel punch, a hammer, and a human hand trying to get that letter perfectly positioned. And sometimes they missed. They'd strike it once, realize the placement was slightly off, and then punch it again in the correct spot. But the damage was already done. That first impression left a ghost image, a shadow of the letter sitting just north of where it was supposed to be. And that mistake, that tiny fraction of a millimeter of human error, turned a 1-cent coin into an $800 coin at the MS-63 brown grade level. That's the auction record for a confirmed FS 501. But repunched mint marks aren't the only thing hiding on these coins. The 1927 Philadelphia issue, the no mint mark version, has its own double die obverse, classified as FS 101. We're talking about visible doubling on the lettering of "In God We Trust and Liberty." A dramatic example in MS-64 red sold for over $1,200. And these aren't the kind of errors that require a NASA microscope to find. Strong doubled dies on the 1927 are visible under a basic $10 loop. The doubling shows up on the letters as a shelf-like effect, as if each letter has a tiny ledge underneath it. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. And then there's the error that nobody talks about, the lamination error. When the copper planches were being prepared, sometimes the metal didn't bond properly. Impurities in the alloy created weak spots between layers of the coin's surface. Over time, those weak spots crack, peel, and flake off, leaving a coin that looks like it's literally shedding its own skin. On the 1927D specifically, there are confirmed examples with bright streak laminations. Long, shiny lines cutting across the surface of the coin where the metal separated. These coins are selling on auction sites right now for $50 to $65, even in heavily circulated condition. And the really dramatic ones, the ones with large flaps of metal lifting off the surface, those can push past $100. There's also the wood grain error. This one is wild. Some 1927 pennies, especially the San Francisco issues, developed a surface pattern during the minting process that looks exactly like the grain of a piece of wood. Alternating light and dark streaks running across the face of Abraham Lincoln, across the wheat stalks, across everything. It happens when the copper alloy isn't properly mixed, creating visible banding in the metal itself. Bold wood grain examples sell for $25 to $50, and the exceptionally dramatic ones push higher. So what should you be looking at when you hold a 1927D in your hand? 3 things. First, the mint mark, is that D doubled, showing any sign of a repunch? Second, the surface, do you see streaks, cracks, peeling, or wood grain patterns that indicate a lamination or alloy error? And third, the color. If that coin still has any hint of original red copper color instead of the typical chocolate brown, you are holding something that could be worth hundreds, potentially thousands, of dollars more than you think. Right, stop everything, because this next coin is the one that has caused more arguments between coin dealers, more sleepless nights for collectors, and more jaw-dropping auction results than almost any other dime in the last 50 years. And what makes it truly terrifying is that it looks completely, utterly, boringly normal. It's a 1971 Roosevelt dime. You probably have one in your house right now. Your parents definitely had a few. Your grandparents probably tossed a handful of them into a jar sometime in the 1970s and forgot about them. And one of those forgotten dimes could be worth more than a brand new car. Here's the headline number. A 1971 Roosevelt dime sold at auction for over $450,000. I'll say it again so it sinks in. $450,000 for a dime. Not a rare colonial coin from the 1700s. Not a gold piece from the Civil War era. A Roosevelt dime from 1971 that weighs less than 3 grams and fits on the tip of your finger. And the reason it sold for that much money comes down to a single missing letter. In 1971, the San Francisco Mint was producing proof Roosevelt dimes. These are specially struck coins made for collectors, with mirror-like surfaces and razor-sharp details. Every single proof coin struck in San Francisco is supposed to carry a small letter S on the obverse, right behind Roosevelt's neck and just above the date. That S tells the world this coin was made at the San Francisco Mint. It's supposed to be there on every single proof coin. But in 1971, something went wrong. A small batch of proof dimes was struck using a die that was missing the S mint mark entirely. Nobody knows exactly how it happened. The most widely accepted theory is that a die was shipped from the Philadelphia hub to San Francisco without the mint mark being punched into it, and somehow it made it through every quality control checkpoint and into the press without anyone noticing. Those coins were struck, packaged into proof sets, and sold directly to collectors who had no idea they were holding one of the rarest error coins in modern American history. When the first 1971 no-S proof dime was discovered, the coin world went absolutely insane. Collectors who had purchased 1971 proof sets years earlier started ripping them open and examining their dimes with magnifying glasses and microscopes. Most of them found exactly what they expected, a normal S mint mark sitting right where it belonged, but a handful of them found nothing. No S, no mark at all, just smooth blank metal where that tiny letter should have been. And those people became instant winners of the numismatic lottery. Now here's what you need to understand. Experts estimate that somewhere between 1,655 and 2,200 of these no-S proof dimes were produced. That sounds like a decent number until you realize that the San Francisco Mint struck over 3 million proof sets that year. That means roughly 1 out of every 1,500 to 2,000 proof sets contained the error. And many of those sets were broken up over the decades, with the coins scattered into collections, estates, and junk bins across the country. Nobody knows how many no-S dimes are still out there waiting to be found. But here's where this gets relevant to you, sitting at home watching this video. Proof sets from the early 1970s are some of the most commonly found items at estate sales, garage sales, flea markets, and antique stores. They were popular gifts and collectibles at the time, and millions were sold. People bought them, stuck them in a drawer, and forgot about them. When those people pass away, their families clean out the house and sell everything for a few bucks at a yard sale. And buried in one of those proof sets could be a dime worth nearly $500,000. I talked to a dealer in Florida who told me he makes a point of buying every 1971 proof set he comes across, no matter the price. He's bought over 300 of them in the past decade. Most of them were normal. But he found 2 no-S dimes. 2. One was graded proof 68 and sold for $230,000. The other was graded proof 67 and sold for $156,000. His total investment in all 300 proof sets was less than $4,000. That is the kind of return that makes Wall Street look like a lemonade stand. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That's great for proof coins. But what about regular 1971 dimes from circulation? I'm glad you asked, because the regular strike 1971 dimes have their own secrets that most people completely overlook. The 1971 Philadelphia dime, the one with no mint mark on the obverse, has a well-documented double die variety that collectors have been chasing for years. On affected coins, you can see clear doubling on the words "In God We Trust" below Roosevelt's chin. The letters appear to have a shadow, like they were stamped twice in slightly different positions. This doubling is subtle on some examples and dramatic on others, but any confirmed 1971 double die obverse dime is worth between $800 and $5,000 depending on condition and the severity of the doubling. And the 1971 D from the Denver Mint has its own issues. Because the Denver facility was producing coins at an incredible pace in the early 70s, die quality was inconsistent across production runs. Some 1971 D dimes exhibit what collectors call a weak strike, where the details on Roosevelt's hair and the torch bands on the reverse are noticeably softer than they should be. On their own, weak strikes don't add much value. But when you find the opposite, a 1971 D with a razor-sharp full band strike on the torch, you've got something special. Full band 1971 D dimes in high grade have sold for over $3,000, and the population of graded examples is small enough that prices keep climbing every year. Here's what I want you to do right now. If you have any proof sets from the early 1970s, especially 1971, pull them out immediately. Look at the dime. Look behind Roosevelt's neck above the date. Is there an S? If there is, you still have a nice proof set worth maybe $15 to $20. But if there is no S, if that space is completely blank and smooth, do not touch that coin. Do not remove it from the holder. Do not breathe on it. Call a professional coin grading service immediately, because you could be holding a coin worth $250,000 or more. And for your circulated 1971 dimes, check for doubling on In God We Trust, and check the torch bands on the reverse for full separation. These simple checks take 30 seconds and could mean the difference between 10 cents and thousands of dollars. Now, the next dime I'm going to show you is the one that coin dealers have been quietly hoarding for the past 2 years. And when you see the auction numbers, you'll understand exactly why they've been keeping this one a secret. $45,000. That's what a single 1937 S Lincoln cent sold for, and the person who found it had no idea what they were holding. They almost spent it. Almost tossed it into a tip jar at a coffee shop. One more second of carelessness and $45,000 would have disappeared into someone's cash register forever. But they didn't. Something told them to look closer. Something told them to flip that coin over one more time. And what they saw changed everything. The 1937 S is one of the most dangerous wheat pennies in existence. Dangerous because it looks so ordinary. It doesn't scream rare. It doesn't have a weird color or an obvious crack running across Lincoln's face. At first glance, it's just another old brown penny from the San Francisco Mint. And that's exactly why so many people have already thrown them away. That's exactly why the ones that remain are becoming more and more valuable with every passing year. And now, with the penny ban about to wipe this coin off the face of the earth permanently, the clock isn't just ticking. It's almost at zero. Here's what makes the 1937 S so special. San Francisco only struck about 34 million of these. That sounds like a lot until you realize that Philadelphia was pumping out 300 million pennies a year during the same period. 34 million is nothing. That's a drop in the ocean. And of those 34 million, most were spent. Most were circulated until Lincoln's face was nothing but a flat smudge. Most were melted. Most were lost. The surviving population in collectible condition is a fraction of what was originally minted. And the ones with errors, those are practically extinct. The first error you need to check for is the repunched mint mark. This is where the San Francisco Mint punched the S into the die, looked at it, and punched it again, slightly off from where it was supposed to go. What you end up with is a coin that has two visible S marks overlapping each other. It's subtle. You need magnification. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. The S looks like it's vibrating. It looks like it's been stamped twice because it was stamped twice. And collectors go absolutely insane for this variety. A clean 1937 S with a confirmed repunched mint mark in uncirculated condition has sold for over $8,000. $8,000 for a penny that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. But the repunched mint mark isn't even the biggest prize. The error that sends this coin into five-figure territory is the double die obverse. Look at the date. Look at the word liberty. Look at In God We Trust. If any of those elements appear to have a shadow, a ghost image sitting just slightly off from the main impression, you are holding a coin that could pay off your car. The doubling on the 1937 S is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a slight thickening of the letters. Sometimes it's a faint shelf on the top of the numbers in the date. But even minor doubling on this coin has pushed values past $15,000 in recent auctions. Strong doubling? That's where you hit the $45,000 mark. That's where one penny becomes a down payment on a house. And here's what most people don't realize. The 1937 S also comes with die crack varieties that collectors pay serious premiums for. A die crack running through the wheat ears on the reverse, a thin raised line where the steel die was literally breaking apart as it struck this coin, can add thousands of dollars to the value. These cracks mean the die was at the end of its life. It was exhausted. It was fracturing under pressure. And the coins it produced in those final moments carry the scars of that destruction. Collectors don't see damage, they see history. They see a coin that was born in the dying breath of a broken die, and they will pay a fortune to own it. Now multiply all of this by the penny ban. Every single day that passes, more 1937 S pennies get thrown away. More get tossed into jars that end up at Coinstar machines. More get lost in couch cushions and forgotten in drawers. The supply is shrinking in real time. And when the ban hits and pennies are officially pulled from circulation, the remaining 1937 S coins, especially the ones with errors, won't just be rare. They'll be relics. They'll be artifacts from a currency that no longer exists. And the prices will reflect that reality in ways that will make today's values look like pocket change. All right, coin number 5, and this one is going to surprise a lot of people. It's a 1973 Roosevelt dime, struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Now I know what you're thinking. A worn-down 73 dime? What's so special about that? Well, here's where it gets interesting. The 1973 Philadelphia dime had a massive mintage, over 315 million coins struck. But within that enormous production run, there are specific error varieties that collectors are actively hunting for right now. The first thing you want to check is the obverse for any signs of a doubled die. On the 1973 dime, the known doubled die obverse shows doubling on the word liberty and on in God we trust. It's subtle, we're talking about separation in the lettering that you'll need a loop or magnifying glass to confirm. But when you find it, a confirmed 1973 doubled die dime in even circulated condition can bring $50 to $150. In uncirculated condition with strong doubling, you're looking at $300 to $500 or more. Now flip it over. The reverse is where the real money hides on Roosevelt dimes. You've heard me say it before, look at the torch bands. A 1973 dime with full torch or full band designation means the horizontal bands on the torch are fully separated and distinct. That separation tells you the coin received a strong, clean strike, and that's exactly what grading services and collectors pay a premium for. A 1973 P-dime graded MS-65 full bands has sold for $30 to $75. But bump that grade up to MS-67 full bands, now you're looking at $200 to $400. And in MS-68 full bands, which is extremely rare for this date, we're talking about $1,000 to $2,500. The other error to watch for is a repunched mint mark, except here's the thing. Philadelphia dimes in 1973 didn't carry a mint mark. So what you're actually looking for on a Philly coin are die cracks and cuds. If you see a raised line running from the rim through the lettering or across Roosevelt's portrait, that's a die crack. And if that crack is large enough to create a blob of extra metal on the rim, that's a cut error. And cut errors on Roosevelt dimes sell for $20 to $200 depending on the size and location. Now here's the big picture on why this matters. Like every other clad coin we've talked about today, the 1973 dime uses the same copper-nickel composition. If the penny ban kicks off a broader conversation about removing low-denomination coins from circulation, dimes are next in line. And when coins get pulled from circulation, the supply of error coins dries up permanently. So don't skip over the dimes. Check the lettering for doubling. Inspect the torch bands. Look at the rim for cracks and cuds. A coin you pulled out of a jar and almost spent at the gas station could be sitting on a $100 to $2,500 payday, and the window to find them is closing.